All right. Hello. Thank you for listening to my signature assignment presentation. My name is Nicole. All right. So my unit plan is titled Where in the World Are We? I created 3 lessons of a 5-lesson unit plan. My subject is 4th grade social studies. Within my group, I had 10 students. One student is an ELL student who is from Egypt. His family actually fled Egypt to find religious freedom. And then I had 2 SPED students. One student was homeschooled, has been homeschooled his whole life, and this is his first year in public education. And he is below standards for everything. And then the second student lost a family member. She lost her father 2 years ago, and she's really been struggling since, and I guess a little before then, but family members refuse to believe that she needs to be assessed. But from my observations and from working with her, she does. So the unit goals are students will understand the importance of absolute location and cardinal direction. Students will understand that the divisions of Earth determine climate and that not every place on Earth is the same. Students will understand why knowing where you are in the world is important. So the social studies standard that we are hitting is students will demonstrate an understanding of physical and human geographic features that define places and regions in California. And within each lesson, we hit the substandard that's underneath that 4.1 social studies standard. So this is the lesson 1 of the unit that I created and taught. My lesson was 1 hour. The state standard that we were trying to hit is explain and use the coordinate grid system of latitude and longitude to determine the absolute location of places in California and Earth. Before you are able to do that, you need to know directions and understand how to use a compass rose. So I created a diagnostic pre-assessment for my students. They would complete a compass rose to the best of their ability before the lesson began. It did not go that well. Students knew north and south, and if they knew east and west, they got them mixed up, and students had no idea what went in these lines. These are intermediate directions, so like northeast would go here. Students had no understanding of what that was. If I were to do this pre-assessment again, I would either give them a word bank or I just wouldn't do it because it didn't go that well. Not many students were successful. So because of what I found from this assessment, we spent some time through my direct instruction going over intermediate and cardinal directions. Alright, so this is lesson 2 that I taught. It was also 1 hour. The state standard is distinguish between the north and south poles, the equator, and the prime meridian, the tropics, and the hemispheres using coordinates to plot locations. So before you can be successful with those skills, you need to know your directions, the difference between latitude and longitude, what the prime meridian, what the equator are. So for that reason, I created a formative assessment that was focused on lesson 1. So here is the assessment that I created. You'll see that I used the same compass rose for the diagnostic assessment. I asked what is latitude, what is longitude, draw and label the prime meridian and the equator, and then students had to find the absolute location of the shapes on this map. So from this assessment, I learned that we needed to go over latitude and longitude. Again, students got mixed up with that, and I didn't really know how to explain it in the way that I wanted them to say they are invisible lines that run blank and blank. So before we started lesson 2, we again went over latitude and longitude. Some students mixed up prime meridian and equator, And then over here, students didn't know what was north and what was west. So we went over that labeling. And then if you'll notice, I highlighted key terms or just keywords in the question. That was to help my SPED and my ELL students to stay focused on what was being asked of them. And during the assessment, I also allowed students to work with a partner, and I think that helped everybody. So this is lesson 3. I did not teach this lesson, but I just wanted to go over the assessments that I used in lesson 3. So I again did a formative assessment in regards to what students learned in lesson 2. They would have to draw and label the hemispheres, just name the hemispheres, talk about the tropics, and again I highlighted and underlined important words within the questions. And then students in lesson 3 were also going to make a poster, and I created a rubric of all the things that needed to be on the poster. This was kind of a fun little project-based assessment where students could go learn about something on their own. And then I created a summative assessment that was a unit test that was focused on lesson 1, lesson 2, and lesson 3, and was familiar or was similar to all the lesson check-ins that I had them do. So just some final thoughts on my project. I think I did a good job on creating accessibility for my lesson 1 and lesson 2 check-ins with how I highlighted the words and the questions. We did an activity that went really well. Students would draw on a paper plate like it was a globe, and students were really interested in that. My grouping went well. I had students work together for the assessments, and I think they enjoyed working together, and I know it helped my ELL and my SPED students. And I did a good job of like walking around and making sure everyone was on task and asking questions and answering questions when needed. So some things that I could have done better: my diagnostic assessment, you heard me talk about that. It just did not go as well as I hoped it would. The organization of paper plate activity and the accessibility of activity, I didn't really talk about that too much, but it kind of got a little chaotic. Some students were drawing lines of latitude when others were drawing their compass. It was just very unorganized. And then during the lessons, I played videos, and I forgot to put on the closed captioning, so that was a big no-no, Miss Nicole. So just next time, I'll provide more accessibility for my ELL and SPED students. I will not play a video if the setup of the lesson is similar to this setup, and I will utilize technology for a lesson check-in. Thank you for listening.